Practice self-confrontation, self-awareness, self-reflection. Have you sacrificed your integrity to save a relationship? Most of the time, the worst in us comes out during conflict. Hurting people hurt others, right? If we're hurting others. Individuals who fear abandonment are masters at control. If they can manipulate people, then they can reduce their anxiety of abandonment. Can anybody recognize how powerful that is? So, if you can recognize that you have such a big abandonment issue, you feel a sense of security when you know what's happening. And when do you know what's happening? When you control the situation, right? So recognizing all how these little pieces kind of stick together, that's why I was mentioning it, because I think it's important. Do you lie and tamper with the facts when someone finds you at fault? I've done that. And do you play the victim role to gain sympathy? When someone confronts you, do you pretend to be confused? Do you shame your partner, family, and friends into spending time with you? Do you attack someone's weaknesses to get your way? Most people would rather turn a blind eye and tolerate their depravity than acknowledge its existence. It is more easier to blame someone than to self-reflect. If only they noticed me or just listened to me. I feel like we've all kind of said that to ourselves. The first person you need to confront is you. Individuals with a strong sense of self admit when they are wrong. To heal from abandonment, you need to become a person who daily self-reflects and takes responsibility for how your actions hurt people. And again, that's if this applies. Self-reflection starts when you stop to reflect and examine your attitudes and behaviors to see if they are out of alignment with your core values. Core values, I think, are very important for anybody to try to take a moment to reflect and see what yours are. And the reason why I say that is when someone had asked me that, I actually didn't know what to answer. And when I did take the time to sit and say, what would I say are my core values or a part of my character, I realized that I wasn't in alignment with the things that I probably should have been, because I took that moment to reflect on it. And I was like, okay, well, if that's what I want my character to be, I should probably be doing this a little different and this a little different. So again, it's a self-awareness tool that I think is very powerful for ourselves. You correct personal flaws and take ownership for bad behavior, even if there are costs and repercussions involved. You change not to get a certain response from someone, but to maintain your self-integrity and honor yourself, your character. You honor yourself and mold your character when you confront the worst in yourself. In return, you will regain your lost sense of self. Do not dodge responsibility because of your past. Stop blaming, justifying, or making excuses for bad behavior to save face, because it will never hold value in molding your character. Because again, this is another self-reflection tool. If you resonate with making everybody happy, these are things that you should be looking at and applying to yourself and why you would do those things, right? Start by taking inventory on how unfairly you treat people in life, including strangers. Boldly admit any toxic traits that may arise in this awareness. Do not accept more responsibility than is due but your own part. This could be hard if you have identified any codependency issues due to giving value to yourself in another. Example, your partner, friend, family engages in bad behavior, and you feel a sense of guilt due to your attachment to them, even if you were not involved in the behavior itself. I have to dive in a little more about this because this can show itself in many, many ways. And if I can shed light on this for anybody, I guarantee you, you're going to be able to shed a bunch of guilt and shame that doesn't belong to you and it belongs to someone else. Now, my personal example I'm going to give is when I was in my marriage with my narcissist. We have 3 children. And anybody who has children, let alone 3 or more, you know that it's crazy and it's a lot of kids to have. And at one point, all my kids were 5 and under. So they were very close in age and they were all very young. And this was like at the worst time where stuff was just crazy in that house. And he would behave so erratical. And it was against anything that I would agree with. It was against the ways that I would behave, screaming at the kids, profanities at the kids, just disgusting things that would come out of his mouth. And as he was behaving that way, I recognized as I was on my healing journey that I took on a sense of guilt for how he was behaving. And I didn't recognize it until I was out of that relationship and I was with my children, in our own dynamics, that I would always kind of feel this guilt or shame. And I recognized it was because I still was playing this like narrative of his in my head that I was still there. So I unknowingly took on blame for his behavior because they're also my kids and I chose him as my partner, So keep in mind that we can take on blame. And I also recognize this in my relationships with my brothers. My brothers were fucking nut jobs, excuse me, but they were out of their fucking mind. I grew up in this totally dysfunctional, toxic relationship of a family. So I don't talk to them. My brothers were behaving in certain ways. And when I was still in that family dynamic, I would take on their behaviors and I would take on whatever they did. And if I didn't agree with it, I would feel horrible about it because that's my family. And I felt like as if somehow I had some involvement with it, whether it was DNA or whatever it was. So recognizing this, I think, is very powerful, especially when you come from dysfunctional families and you've grown up with them, because I was doing this my whole life. So it's not like at one point I started doing it and I was like, oh yeah, let me go back to who I was. No, there was no back to who I was. I had to just recognize it and I had to confront it. And in confronting that, I confronted a lot of, ready, fucked up shit that I did, where I was disgusting in my behaviors to people that I think about it and I'm like, God, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that to that person. I can't take over that moment again. I can't rewind time and behave differently, So again, I recognize a lot of dumb stuff and we're all going to recognize these things. So when you recognize them, don't beat yourself up because we can all do it. Nobody just talks about it. Okay. So you're not alone in recognizing, when you were shitty, right? We've all been shitty, especially when you're around shitty people. I'm about to give a bunch of shitty analogies. Let's keep on moving. Humbly confess your offenses, if possible, with a therapist, close friend, choose wisely, or open support group with like-minded people seeking their own self-reflection. Building a strong self will stir up your anxiety, but every time you abstain from reassurance seeking and controlling behaviors, you strengthen your emotional muscles. Every time you take a moment to self-reflect, you gain strength, therefore allowing yourself the potential to doing it more often. And then I put change and growth. You are repaving a new path or trench for your future responses for yourself, and congratulations for that. And this is where I finished my document. Again, I want everybody to look over that on their own, read it, feel it, see if you resonate with it, and take your time. Be kind with yourself. I know a lot of times in the past, people would always say, oh, be kind to yourself. And I didn't know what that meant. And again, I host another event on this too. I'm about to get into, Laura knows, I'm about to get into a whole other topic. But, being kind to yourself, as briefly as I can kind of mention it, is recognizing what makes you feel uncomfortable and what makes you feel safe. And that continuously changes. So having the awareness even to that and saying like, okay, I'm going to feel myself out. I'm going to pay attention to how I feel around people, places, X, Y, and Z, right? How my emotional state is. I might not always agree with how I feel because I've, again, found myself in those moments where out of nowhere, I'll feel my heart start pounding and I'll say, why am I feeling this way? Nothing's happening right now. I'll be driving or I'll, and I'll say, okay, well, let me think about this. Instead of in the past where I would start to feel this and go, what's wrong with me? Oh gosh, what is it now? Right now I'll say, okay, this is a perfect time for me to gauge myself. What's going on? but it starts with the awareness of ourselves and how our bodies feel. So being kind to yourself is recognizing when you get triggered, when you get heart palpitations, right? And then stopping and saying, okay, am I safe? I don't know if anybody's familiar, but when you're in therapy and you have anxiety, the therapist like ground yourself, all right? And if it means looking in the room and saying, okay, I want to find something green, I want to find something blue, right? By doing that subconsciously, you're concentrating on looking for something. So your mind is now not thinking about whatever it was that triggered you, right? But when you're outside, you could do the same thing. What can I feel? What can I smell? What can I hear? And just taking those moments. So if anybody hasn't heard of that, those are great tools as well. When you're having these anxiety attacks, if you start recognizing that you have a physical reaction over yourself, just try to ground yourself and say, okay, well, am I safe? I've had to do this with myself and I still do it. I'm not saying I get triggered very often, but I still do. I mean, I've lived a whole life of trauma. I mean, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but I'm kind to myself when I recognize it. And when I feel those things, now I know I'm like, okay, I'm not in danger. What's going on? Why am I feeling this way? And after a while, the more and more you do that, now I embrace that. Not that I look forward to it. That's a little crazy. But, when I do find myself in those moments, I'm excited to dive into myself and figure what it is, because I don't have as much as an emotional attachment as I used to when I was younger or when I was less self-aware. And one of the best compliments I hear from people is, wow, you're so self-aware. And I'm like, hell yeah. Like, that's one hell of a compliment. Like when someone can say that and they don't really even know you all that well. And they're like, wow, you're one of the most self-aware people I've ever met in my life. And I'm like, and if anybody's ever heard me talk about receipts, I know Laura might laugh. Yeah. I'm a big believer in telling ourselves when we hear compliments and stuff, that's a receipt. That's a receipt. And it's a very powerful thing. And I probably should have even included it into the document, but I didn't because I made that document like 2 months ago. And the receipt thing is new to me, like in the past month and a half, because someone had asked me, oh no, I told someone a story. I was like, oh yeah, I got such a great compliment today. I felt so, honored that this person said this thing. And I told them the story. And then they said, okay, well, if that person didn't tell you that, would you have still been able to recognize that in yourself? And I was like, no. I'm like, isn't that the whole point of giving a compliment? And the compliment meaning so much is like, wow, I've never, and she's like, well, that person just recognized something about you that existed about you before they told you. So you should really find a way to make sure that you know that. And you don't get validation from people telling you that. And I was like, okay, easier said than done. And that's when she said, there's this thing called the receipts. So when you get compliments, start telling yourself that's a receipt. That's a receipt. And it sounds so silly, but it is so powerful. Again, I just literally started doing this receipt thing like maybe 2 months ago. And I can tell already how different it is. It's a very powerful tool to use. So I highly recommend it. And again, it's a thing you're just going to tell yourself in your mind. That's a receipt. That's a receipt, and it's not gonna, it like stops you from telling yourself, oh, wow, that person saw something in me that people don't. No, again, we might not get compliments. Thankfully enough, I host these events. So I love when people share, their words with me. It means so, so much to me. But if I wasn't doing this, I probably wouldn't get people to tell me, I wouldn't really, I don't interact with people. So, in those moments when you do get that opportunity and someone compliments you on especially something that you've worked hard on, if someone says, oh, you're so self-aware, I'm like, oh, gosh, because I put that work in, that means so much, so take that as a receipt because that is you. That is you. Hello, this isn't English grammar class. That be you. That is you. So I'm glad that I actually got through that document and my talking rather quickly because I thought that document was going to take me a lot longer. So if anybody wants to share anything, I open the floor up. Laura.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, that is such great information. Thank you for taking the time to put that together and to break it down and explain it to us. I really, really appreciate it. Very, very helpful. I guess my question, you were just talking about self-aware, is how do we become more self-aware? Like, what can we do to become, because I feel like the things like you were talking about, I don't even recognize sometimes when I'm having heart palpitations or I'm having anxiety. I don't even recognize it.
So, okay, so it's a great question, and I hope you don't feel silly by asking that at all, because no, I hope not. Okay. So I would say to start is that trying to recognize that emotional reaction. That's how I started, because I didn't trust my physical reaction and my logical mind. They were just not on the same page. Like, I did a lot of growing mentally, wisdom, and then my body was just like behind me on it. If you haven't gotten to a point where you've recognized it, maybe set a timer on your phone 2 to 3 times a day, and put the alarm as like self gauge or something. And when that alarm goes off, just take 5 minutes to ask yourself, how am I feeling? Do I have anything stuck in a looping thought? I know we talked about looping thoughts, right? So, even doing that, and if you do that 2 to 3 times a day, so say if you started tomorrow, you did it 3 times a day, the 3 times that you did it, I don't think you're going to get the same answers in all aspects at all those 3 times. And then when you look at it, right, at the end of the day, now you're subconsciously programming your mind to know that you're going to do that tomorrow. Right. And I don't know
if you write it down, or do you just
you can write it down. I'm a big, I told you about those little notebooks, right? So I'm a big believer in writing things down, because it just resonates different and it hits a little harder. And I know we talked about the black and white, right? When I would write things down and reflect back on it, I'm like, that's black and white. That's black and white of whatever, because that was the stuff that I decided to write down. Those were facts. I wasn't emotionally, tangled into things. So writing things, I am a big believer on. I would definitely do it. And I don't know if you had a chance to look into Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you had a chance to look into him from that document? So that one document, I had like a link to his YouTube, but he talks about how these very things we have to start doing in order for our mind to start subconsciously expecting us to do it next time, right? So it's like you have a gratitude journal. I remember you telling me about the gratitude journal, right? So same concept, when people start doing gratitude journals, they know that tomorrow at the end of the night, or whatever time they do their gratitude journal, they have to put something in that entry. So their agenda that day is finding something to be grateful for. So it's just adding another agenda. So now you're just sprinkling another little agenda. And that agenda is going to be, I'm just going to check in with myself a couple times a day, and I'm going to see how I feel, and it's letting your body and your mind know that you're expecting them to start working on the same page.
That's great. Thank you. Very helpful.
Welcome. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about? Or
hi, I'll go first. Hi, Michelle. Actually, it's my first time attending this meeting, and I'm really overwhelmed right now because you and I share the same story. I myself grew up in foster homes. I got huge abandonment issues. I lost my mom when I was 5 and grew up in the system. And I'm 50, and survival's not working anymore. And I know I'm always looking, but I'm taking responsibility now. Things are coming up, and I've just got custody of my granddaughter, who's 9 years old, and her trauma is now triggering my trauma and my abandonment issues. And I feel everything that she's feeling. And it's a lot of pain. And so now I know that I need to start working on my abandonment, because it's hard. It's hard out there. And I'm trying to help my granddaughter talk about toxic families. My brother, I've earned for his love over so many years, and he never has time for me. I'm never good enough for him. And my daughter just actually moved. I'm from Toronto. My daughter just actually moved to New Jersey today. So I'm feeling more abandonment issues.
Oh,
Yeah, I feel a lot of loss in the last God, 6 months.
wow, that's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot to have in that short time span.
Yeah, so I'm here looking for a solution because emotionally, like I know my abandonment is my survival. It's not working anymore.
Yeah,
And I need to
but
get well. So
yeah, the fact that you can recognize, like, okay, I was on survival. I've been living on survival is a big awareness. But it's also frustrating because I understand, like, when I recognize that, I was like, okay, but now what? And then if anything,
yeah,
it becomes more pressing because you're so aware of it. It's in your face, you know about it, but you still don't know how to evolve out of it. I also want to mention, I talked about this another night in another event, that it's a beautiful thing when we can see, well, mostly when it's with children, but like recognizing that we have to become better people because we have to be better for that child. And that's also a trauma response, in my opinion, too, is putting other people in front of ourselves. I know I did that in my abusive relationship with my husband, and especially my family. They were dysfunctional for a long time. I put them in front of how I was. But when we become better people, because we know that we need to be better for our children, because I'm saying she's your child, you're her mom, basically. Um, it just, it's a very empowering thing to say, okay, I know that this has worked against me in the past, but this is the positive aspect of that, right? Because we can always look back and say, oh, I always cared too much, or I always, and like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just when we were in those situations, we just applied it to the wrong things. So right now, recognizing that within yourself, I think should be a really great self-empowering thing, because you're doing that for the right reason for Ava. And recognizing, no, but I also need to be a good person. So I also need to work on myself and me by myself individually.
yeah, and I know that in the past I played a lot of victim roles growing up in survival because it was always everybody else's fault. And so I started getting into my own therapy. And now it's like I take responsibility. It's just the emotions that I can't identify with. Like I feel when I'm shutting down, I'm a person, I keep everybody at distance. I don't bring people into my life because of the trust issues. So I'm opposite. It's like, don't get too close because you're going to hurt me. So I keep people at arm's length. It's too independent. Don't do this. I got this.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's your sense of security, is the control, right? Controlling
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. I would like
Mhm.
to offer up that document for you about
Yes.
emotions. Um, I don't think I have an event hosted, or if I do, it might be next month. So I would like to extend that to you sooner than that. And even if we
Thank
just
you.
do a one-on-one and I could do a screen share and we could talk about stuff.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Sorry, last question. How do I put my hand back down?
I got you. Hold on.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Jill. Okay, no, I got you too.
There we go.
I was
Sorry,
just,
you
I
guys.
can mute you. I can move your hands. I can do it.
I'm like
All right.
really close to you guys. I don't know how to. I don't even know what I want to say. I initially was going to make a comment to was it Holly's what she asked you that question, or Laura? I don't
Oh,
know.
Laura.
Everybody moved around on the screen.
I know.
But before I say that, I don't think I've done this before that I'm aware of, and I just want to say thank you. I'm just in awe of hearing other people's stories. I have all of my own pain, but it's so beautiful for me to hear other people share their stories of their pain, and that and of itself, I'm finding that I have this feeling right now of feeling healed because I'm not alone. And Laura, I just say, or both of you, Laura and the other woman, I think it was Jeannie. I have never been homeless by the grace of God. I feel like I would have been when I went through my divorce had I not had a little nest egg from daddy. And I'm very aware of that without that. But anyway, I think you guys are all so beautiful, and I just want to say thank you for the connection. And then Laura, the only thing that resonated with me when you said that was, for me, I think that I felt like such utter shit for so long that I didn't have the self-awareness that I was feeling bad, because I didn't know what it felt like to feel good. So for me, when I started having those good moments, which were often few and far between, it like slowly creeped into me that like, oh, this is what it's like to smile. This is what it's like to laugh. And then I would actually, and I've tried to do this, whether it's, I don't know, I think I reconnected with my past before COVID. I started reaching out to people that I like, high school friends. I'm 54, and I was selective, or, you know, who I thought would be a good person to connect with. And I found connecting with some good people from my past was
Wow.
really healing, because I remembered myself at a time that I was happy. I have a very close guy friend that's happily married in Minnesota, and I'm in the DC area, and we've been friends since college. And I was so happy to reconnect with him, because he's always someone that's made me feel good about myself. He's just such a good friend. And yeah, that was really important, of just finding there's got to be good people in our past. I think that I removed myself from my past because I felt like everyone else had a perfect life. So why would I even bother to find my friend from my past, because everyone else's life was better than mine and I was a loser.
Exactly.
And the more I reconnected, I found that, you know, certain people, you know, cover it up and pretend and give you all the BS, but the good people will really tell you like it is. And that's rewarding.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's very
You guys
helpful.
are awesome. Thank you.
So are you.